Hello, chess friends, welcome back. Today we're back to talking about calculation, and we'll do it with the three principles of calculation, which are three questions we must ask ourselves during a chess game regarding our calculation. How, when, and why. It sounds like a joke, but wait, we're getting there. Let's examine these three questions and try to understand their usefulness. First of all, the how. I must say that on this channel, I've often brought you videos on calculation. You can find them scattered across the channel. If you missed them, go check them out. So we've already answered the how in previous videos. As for the when and the why, we'll work on those today by looking at this game of mine. It's a game from the 2024 Master, a game I'm absolutely happy with, because we need to understand one of the most important things: when to calculate and why to calculate, because we can't just start using the calculation algorithm on every single move or calculate all the variations. Here I'm about to start the game and I calculate, if I play e4, what happens? If I play d4, what happens? Obviously not, so knowing when to calculate is very important. So let's play a few moves of this game first so we can reach the key moments where we can start making certain reasonings. The game was played in the Master against Marco Lazzarini, who is a very good player, around 2150, quite close to the Master title. This is the first round against the Grifone di Arzignano, Palermo Arzignano 2024. Okay, this French defense is played, Rubinstein variation. This d takes e4, which let's say is becoming quite trendy at the moment with all the grandmasters of the French school trying it out with decent results, I might add. Knight d7, knight f3, knight f6, this is the main variation. Here, obviously, black is interested in exchanging some pieces, you see, because they have less space. Unfortunately, white can't avoid it because retreating the knight would mean losing too many tempos. And so at that point, black recovers their missing dynamism anyway. So here is just as well to capture. And now I really like playing with this move. Here, g3. What's the idea? The idea is very logical. In my opinion, this is the most logical variation of the Rubinstein because the weak point of black's position is this bishop here. So I'm going to put the bishop on g2 specifically to fight against this bishop here. I want my position to be superior precisely because of the difference between these two. So in my opinion, this is quite an interesting variation. Then, of course, there's the main one, right? Here it's normally bishop d3, but I think this one is very logical. Now here, Marco plays a very good variation because Marco plays b6, because here black already has to be very careful, because obviously if I manage to put the bishop on g2 and exert this pressure, it's clear that white will be better for the whole game, right? And so black rightly plays b6 because they immediately want to go, let's say, to prevent this pressure. And I once again can't play bishop g2 because after bishop b7, black achieves his goal. And so here we move forward quickly with the theory bishop b5 check to try and put this bishop in a bad spot, but above all, to play the move a4. Thanks to this move, quote unquote, we're preventing the exchange of bishops. Because after bishop takes, pawn takes, obviously black exchanges the bishop, yes, but faces some problems, some worse problems. At this point, the variation then goes like this with a 6, bishop e2, bishop c6. This is all, let's say, a theoretical variation. Now let's start talking about calculation, and especially when to calculate. I'll give you the rule right away. Besides the obvious, meaning what is the obvious? The obvious is when there are a couple of hanging pieces, when there's contact between pieces, well, there it's obvious we must start calculating. Let's say the most important aspect of calculation, we have to do it. We have to start calculating when there are irreversible structural changes. So when one of the two sides could bring about a structural change. At the moment, this problem doesn't arise because both still have the king in the center. So there's no time to change structures, etc., etc. Both here must, let's say, prioritize development. And so we can move forward for now, right? Short castle, bishop d6, knight e5. Okay, here, it's not actually a moment where we need to calculate because, true, I just told you the time for calculation is when pieces are in contact. For example, he could take the knight here. However, this isn't really a move that needs serious calculation because generally black shouldn't do it, as it gives up the bishop pair, quote unquote, improves white's structure. The only thing he gets is the exchange of these queens. But in reality, white is very comfortable with the bishop pair. That said, it's still a playable move that my opponent actually played. Here he played bishop takes d6. But this isn't a moment where it was actually necessary to calculate much, because here white recaptures and is very happy. Queen d5, a very interesting move. He was quite clever here because he wants to exchange queens, but he wants to exchange them on his terms. So if he plays queen takes d1, rook takes d1, obviously I'm comfortable. Instead, queen to d5, which threatens this mate, quote unquote, forces me to take on d5, and he improves his knight's position without, let's say, giving me the tempo of rook d1. So here, queen d5 is the correct move. Well, at this point, now that dynamism is no longer the fundamental aspect of the game, so there are no problems with the king, etc., etc., now is the time we must ask ourselves this question. Are there moves that irreversibly change the structure? And here, the answer is actually yes, because I have a choice I can make here. What is this choice? The choice of whether to play a 5 or not to play a 5. Why is the choice irreversible? Because if I were to play any other move here, I don't know, let's take c3 as an example, which is a useful move, obviously controlling important squares. Here my opponent can play the move of 5. And so this thing is irreversible because now I can no longer push and get the other structure. So this is a moment where I thought for 30 minutes, in fact, during the game, because I want to choose what kind of structure I want to face, how I want to play the rest of the game. If I want to play with this structure, because obviously on a 5, well, b5 is generally the move. If I want to play against this structure or if I want to play against this other structure, obviously what I'm showing you is already a high-level theme, because then at very low levels, when calculating, the answer is very simple. We calculate when there are pieces hanging, when in short there are contacts between pieces, or anyway, especially if there are undefended pieces, right? That's the moment when my calculation kicks in. This is already a more advanced concept, but let's say, as always, I try to bring you, well, to a next level, and I'll show you this too. And in this position, moving on with the game, I chose to play with the structure with a 5. Why is that? You see, when I tell you about the study of patterns, because these pawns combined with the bishop of the same color represent a pattern of inferiority. That is, in all endgames, and as in all the best stories, now we will see the endgame precisely with this bishop and these 2 pawns. In all endgames, this bishop will suffer from these 2 pawns. So I choose this structure almost by instinct, but in reality, I thought for 30 minutes here, because naturally I could also allow this move here because maybe it leaves holes, weaknesses. So, but in the end, I chose this one. Let's say it's the correct choice. Let's move on with the game because I also want to indeed show you the end game, honestly, which is really, really beautiful. Here, honestly, there's not much to calculate, right? We have to bring out the pieces. I play it on d2 because obviously I want to develop a piece, but at the same time I want to prevent knight b4 anyway, which are annoying ideas anyway. Short castle, rook d1, rook d8, and now c3. Here, white's advantage is very, very calm, right? I have the bishop pair. I just have to stabilize the position. If I exchange rooks and reach the endgame, this is still a superior endgame for 2 reasons. One, his structure, as mentioned, the bishop pattern that we're going to see now. And then obviously the bishop pair pretty much for free. Besides a bit of space advantage, which, well, doesn't hurt. King f8, b3. So I'm making quiet moves here. Maybe I want to prepare. c4. Bishop a1, as I told you before, if rooks are exchanged, it's not a problem. Rook d7. Here I play rook b1. Is a move with which, again, I want to prepare c4. Actually, I'm still waiting for things to unfold because I really want to trade these rooks. And I know that sooner or later, he won't handle the tension and might move the knight. In fact, he plays knight e7 and here very calmly. 4. I set up what I need to. Rook takes d1, rook takes d1. To take is a mistake, you know it by now. Rook takes d1, not a great move, because either way, it lets me improve my rook's position. Bishop a4, to which I play c4, because somehow, if this diagonal were to open up, see what I told you before? The famous pawn pattern on a 6, and now we'll suffer for it. In fact, he plays c6 because he obviously doesn't want to allow this opening, let's say, of the diagonal either this way or even this way, which I then push. And so here he plays c6. Rook d2. Rook d2 is actually a move that serves no purpose. It's a move that puts him in a tough spot because here he has to find a plan that doesn't exist. And indeed, he doesn't find one because he plays rook d8. And here, let's say, I really wanted to make this trade. And here after g4, I have a major positional threat that wasn't spotted. He plays bishop c2, attacks the pawn. I played b4, bishop b3. Now the position is 1. Why is it 1? Pawn takes, pawn takes. What's the strategic threat? Pause if you want and find it. In this position, bishop h4, a very strong move that effectively trades off this knight. And now the endgame is lost. You see how important studying endgames at a high level is. It might look like an equal endgame, equal pawns, but this structure with this bishop is losing. Watch what happens. I improve my king. And now he has pieces stuck. I can play on both sides of the board. So meanwhile, I play f5, taking some space. And now I make this move. I want to relocate the bishop. Bishop d5, bishop c2. Another problem with his position, Zugzwang. See, if he moves the bishop, I can still exploit it and put my bishop on b3. If he moves the king, I enter with the king. So black's position is completely disastrous. E takes f5, g takes f5, bishop g2. And now I'll show you a concept I've already shown you in other games, which is the concept of dominance. Here, obviously, let's say at some point, meanwhile I force f6, right? Bishop b3, f6. At some point I'll want to play s6 with what idea? To play s7, deflect his king and enter with mine. Obviously, in this position, he can never make this move. Why can't he? Because after king takes, his king is always tied to defending the queen side. Because see my bishop, it gets there quickly if needed, and here I'll simply feast. Basically, on the king side, I'll enter and take everything, so he can never take. He has to try to play with his fortress. Before playing e6 and e7, I made a couple of waiting moves here. I can afford them, partly to confuse my opponent, right? So here I moved the bishop around a bit. I moved it, taking my time. And then at a certain point here, I played e6. He responds with king e7. You see, I placed my pieces exactly where I wanted. I put the bishop on g6 to prevent any counterplay on the pawn. So now I can move in and look at this pattern. This is the pattern. The bishop is poorly placed because it can't defend its pawn. As the king enters, the bishop has to move. Then the king attacks from this side now. The bishop must move again, and when I put the king on b7, the bishop can't return. That's why this structure is obviously completely disastrous for whoever has this bishop. In this end game, it just takes a bit of calculation. King d6. Here he tried to block my king, but realistically I can free my pieces thanks to the Zugzwang. See, I go and take this one, and of course it's true that he still has his own pawns, but mine are much further advanced. Here I simply start pushing. See, I'm going straight for it. He has to give up the bishop, and here's a simple technique. I attack a pawn, force it to push, and now the bishop blocks both of them. And obviously the game ends here because now I put the bishop on f3, then the king has to move, and the pawn promotes on a white square. There's clearly no defense. Just as an example, this move, and after this one, there's no way. Yes, he can sacrifice the pawns, but I'll always be able to force him out of the corner and, well, there's nothing that can be done here to stop the promotion. So today we went a bit deeper because the calculation involved is quite high level, without a doubt, but keep this in mind. There's an ideal moment to calculate, and that's when an irreversible change in structure is about to occur. So this is a moment where I have to decide whether to play a5 or if I should let him play it instead. And depending on that, two completely different structures will emerge. So this is a good time to invest your time. Well, I hope you enjoyed this lesson. It was perhaps a bit more complex than others, as I said, because we're tackling very high-level topics. And as always, if you want to support the channel, please subscribe, like, and leave a comment. See you in the next videos.